and welcome to today's lesson. Today's lesson is going to be on quadrats and it's actually going to be a two-part lesson, so we'll be doing 2 hours on quadrats. To start off with, please can you make sure that you're prepared, that you've either got your book, a piece of paper, or have a Word document ready to make sure that you can write down all of your answers from this lesson. Can you also make sure that you've got a green pen handy or know how to change your font to green so that you can mark your answers as we go through? So to start with then, what I'd like you to do is write your date and your title for today. Make sure that those things are underlined with a ruler or on your Word document, and we'll get started. So for Shipwreck Survivor to work, you must ensure that the contestants have enough food to eat in their chosen location. So your question for your quick start is, what methods could you use to determine if there was enough food for your contestants? So what I would like you to do is to pause the video, have a go at that question, and then come back here when you are ready. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time to have a look at this question. What methods could you use to determine if there was enough food for your contestants? So you might have had things on there like make sure that you're counting how many species are available, but that's what we're going to look at today. So let's have a look at our progress targets. So we're going to identify how to estimate the number of plants from a given sample. We're going to describe the process of using quadrats to estimate a sample of a plant species. We're going to explain the limitations of using quadrats to estimate a sample of plant species and apply data from quadrat sampling to determine if the results are reliable, accurate and valid. So let's get started then. Task 1. Scientists need to have an idea of how many organisms of a species are present in a habitat. But why is that? So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and write down, list why you think it is important for scientists to have an idea of how many organisms are in a habitat. Okay, so hopefully you've had a think about that question. Why is it important that scientists have any idea what types of species are in a habitat? It's especially important to know these things in case there are any large population changes, and that could lead to changes in the entire ecosystem. So if you've got a place and it did have a lot of vegetation and then that dies off, what impact will that have on all of the other animals and all of the other organisms in that ecosystem? And once you know that information, you can do things about it, and you can try and get around the problem. Maybe you could plant more species of plants to make sure that there is food available for different animals, but it is important for scientists to know that, and especially for what we're looking at today. Okay, so scientists use this word called abundance, and abundance is a measure of how common something is in an area, such as its population. It's usually impossible to count all of the organisms in a population. But why is that? If you think about a large area, it's pretty much impossible to go and count every daisy in a field or count how many squirrels there are in a park. And it's also impossible to know if you've missed any individuals. If you think about squirrels in Haywood Park and you wanted to count all of them, how would you know if you'd missed one? But how can we get around that problem? And that is what we're going to look at today. So if you think about the squirrels in the park, what you can do is you can use capture, mark and release methods. But how will this work? So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and have a think about how we might capture, mark and release animals in a certain area. Okay, so hopefully you've had a look at that question. So if you have a look at this picture, this isn't squirrels, this is turtles. But if you went to a place on the day one and you caught all of the turtles that you could catch and you put a little dot on them, it will be a marker, something that is non-toxic to that animal. You go away and then you come back and you collect the same amount of animals. Some of those animals will be marked and some of them won't. And you can use this method called capture, mark and release to make sure and figure out how many animals you have in a certain area. Now, there are a couple of pitfalls with this method. Is obviously you don't want to harm the animals, so that needs to be a humane capture and a humane mark. And remember that humane means that you are making sure that you're not harming the animal in when you do this method. But that's not as easy for plants, because for plants they're much harder to count, more often because there are a lot of them, much more than animals, and also they look exactly the same. I mean, the good thing is that they won't be moving around, but there will still be a lot of them. And if you've got a very large area, then you wouldn't want to count every single plant in that certain area. So if you think about the school field and dandelions, if you looked out, it's a very large area, but how would you count them all without actually counting every single one? And that is where quadrats come in. So if you look at these pictures, this is a quadrat. They're usually a metre by a metre, and they're split up into sections. And what we can do is we can use this piece of equipment to figure out the average plants in a certain area. Sometimes they have quite small squares, sometimes they have larger squares. They can be lots and lots of different shapes and sizes, but it enables you to kind of average out how many plants there are in a certain area. So quadrat sampling works by counting how many species that are in an area on average, and then scaling the number up to take into consideration the entire size of that area. So if you have a look at this data, so we've got two columns, we've got every time a quadrat was thrown, because they're quite small and we're going to be throwing the quadrats. So every time you throw a quadrat, how many daisies have you got in that quadrat? Now, once you've got this information, you can do a certain thing with it. So it says, in the example shown, there is a 1 metre squared quadrat and it was placed 7 times. So in the first time, we've got 2 daisies, and then down here in the fourth time, we have 10 daisies. In this case here, when this throw was done, you actually had no daisies. So what you need to do first is to calculate the mean of the daisies. Now remember, the mean is kind of an average of how many daisies there are. So we know that to calculate a mean, we have to add them up. In this case, it's already done for you. So the total daisies here is 35. And then we divide them, that number, by how many ones we've got. So we would do 35 divided by 7. So what I would like you to do is make sure that you've got your calculator, or if you've got your computer, you can do it on your calculator on your computer. Add them up and divide them by how many you've got. Okay, so hopefully you've done that now, and you should have got an answer of 5 daisies per quadrat. So that's 35 divided by 7, which is equal to 5 daisies per quadrat. So we need to work out how many daisies there are per metre square. Now, luckily, this will depend on which quadrat you use, and in this case we've used a 1 metre by 1 metre quadrat. However, sometimes quadrats are smaller. For example, if you're using a 0.5 metre by 0.5 metre quadrat, then you will need to times the number that you got by 4, as if you didn't do that, you would only have how many daisies there were per 0.25 of a square metre. But that's not the case in this one, because we've used a 1 metre by 1 metre quadrat, so we could just use this number of 5 daisies per quadrat, which will be 5 daisies per metre squared. So once we've got that number, we can do some other things with it. So we've got 5 daisies per metre square at the moment, but we want to know how many daisies there are in the entire area that we've sampled. And to do that, we need to multiply the area that we've got. So in this case, in this example, we are using a field, and this field is 100 metres by 100 metres. So the first thing we need to do is we need to times 100 by 100, and that gives you 10,000 metres squared. So that's how much area we've got in the field. Now we know that there are 5 daisies per metre squared, so we do 10,000 times 5, and that gives us 50,000 daisies. Now that is an estimate, an average of, by using this technique, how many daisies we think there are. Bearing in mind, on average, there are 5 daisies per metre squared, so we've taken that up and figured out that there are approximately 50,000 daisies in this field. So it's important when we're using quadrats to make sure that we're doing this randomly. And that is important because we don't want to be throwing this quadrat in the same area, especially if we've got a very large area to look at. There's no rule to how many times you place the quadrat, but it must be appropriate to the size of the area that you are sampling. So for example, if you've got a 100 metre by 100 metre field, how many times do you think you should place that quadrat? Now, if you think about that, that's quite a long way. That's quite a large area. So you wouldn't want to be just doing it 5 or 10 times. An appropriate number would probably be closer to maybe 20 or 50 times, even 100 times for a field that large. That is most appropriate because you want to make sure that you're sampling the entire field rather than just a very small area of the field, and 100 metres is quite a long way. So, taking everything that I've said up to this point in the video into account, I want you to have a look at this question. It says, Fred and Wilma are asked to estimate the total number of daisies on the school field. The school field is 50 metres by 50 metres and they use a 1 metre square quadrat. Here are their results. So we've got 7 quadrat throws and we've got a different amount of daisies in each quadrat throw. So what I would like you to do is to calculate the estimated number of daisies in the entire school field. Now it might be that you can do that straight away. Brilliant, off you go. If not, make sure that you go back through the video and look at the steps that you need to do to get to this answer. So you can pause the video and rewind the video if you're not sure, and then once you've had a go, once you've got the answer, come back here and I will go through the answers with you. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at this now, and I'm going to go through the steps, so make sure you've got your green pen handy to mark your answers, or you can change to a green font now. So the first thing you needed to do is to calculate the mean. So remember that the mean of the daisies is you add up how many daisies there are altogether, and then you divide it by how many quadrat throws you've got. So in this case, you've got a total number of 25 daisies. So when you add up all these numbers, 1, 3, 4, 4, 7 and 6, you'll have got to 25. Once you did that, you needed to do 25 divided by 7 because there are 7 throws in this case, and you will have got a mean of 3.57 daisies. Now remember, that's 3.57 daisies per metre square in this case. Once you've done that, we know that there's this many daisies per metre square because this quadrat is a 1 metre square quadrat. Then you needed to calculate the field area. Now the area, it was 50 metres by 50 metres, so you needed to do 50 times 50 and you got an answer of 2,500 metres squared. Now remember, that is the area of the actual field. And then once you got that number, you were able to work out how many daisies on average were in this field. So you needed to do how many daisies there were per metre squared times by the field area. So that was 3.57 times 2,500, and your answer should have been 8,925 daisies. And remember that that is the estimated abundance of daisies on that field. Okay, so this is the end of lesson 1. So hopefully you've learnt a lot this lesson and you're able to now put this to good use. So it says, using what you've learnt in this lesson, answer the following questions in full sentences. The first question is, describe how you would estimate the population of snakes on the island. Question 2 is describe how you would estimate the population of small cacti on the island and their small plants. And question 3, explain why this information would be important to the producers of Shipwreck Survivor. Now, don't forget that your teachers are available to help. If you do have a question or you're struggling with any of these questions, make sure that you message them on Teams to help you, because they're there and ready and willing. Once you've done that, please make sure that you have your answers and your teachers will tell you what to do with them. It might be that they want you to submit your answers via Teams. Thank you for listening and watching and doing a good job this lesson, and I will see you on the next lesson.